My name's Phil Webster. After travelling the world for 20 years, I returned to my native England and embarked on an acting career. Things were going pretty good. But losing my mum in 2021, coupled with an unexplained event, sent my life on a completely different path, forever. I trained with indigenous shamans, meditation teachers, mediums and thought leaders, and I wrote a book called Letting Glow. Join me on a quest to demystify the mystical with some of the world's leading experts on the esoteric, consciousness, and the journey to letting glow.
So today I'm talking with Mia Suszko. We've been friends for many years. Our paths have crossed in Helsinki and London, and Mia is now based in California, and she lives there with a partner and a daughter. Mia's an accomplished musician, and today she's here to demystify the mysteries around astrology, which I know nothing about. And I always get astrology and astronomy mixed up, and I'm probably going to do that. How are you doing, Mia? Nice to see you.
I'm doing good, thanks. Thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Yeah, good. Just, going off in all sorts of different directions from the books and things like that. How's motherhood?
Oh, it's tough and amazing at the same time. It's kind of the balance of those two.
Yeah.
Every day is kind of just being amazed by a lot of different little beautiful things, and then also very challenged.
Yeah. It's been really interesting watching your journey on social media. So shall we get to it? I don't know anything about astrology. So what first got you interested in astrology?
So I was about maybe 10 or 11 years old when I remember my sister got a book, an astrology book. It was only about the sun signs though, so it's not very extensive. But I remember being very interested in it, and so I started flipping the book. It was very big, thick book, and I started reading it and then looking up our friends' birthdays, like, oh, when are they born? And then like checking their astrology or sun signs. Pretty soon afterwards, I also found a book of my own at a flea market, which was a lot more in depth about our ascending signs and how to calculate them, and about the houses in the system and what happens when there's different planets in different houses. And I just really, I love those books. And I started asking my friends, like, oh, so what time were you born? That's just kind of when it started. And I still remember like almost all my friends' sun and ascending signs, and it was very interesting.
The sun on a person's chart represents their basic personality traits, is that right?
Yeah, so we could say that the sun is like, it's our want in this life. It's our conscious self. It's our will and our conscious decisions. But then if we look at our moon, for example, you could say that that's our need and more of our soul. So that's why maybe when we're children, you might see a little bit more of the moon sign, because it is like our subconscious nature, our nature that we are born on this earth with, and our emotions and our patterns also that we revert to if we're not conscious. And then the ascendant is more like the costume or the avatar we wear to get what we want and what we need. And it's often also the first impression we give to people when we meet them.
That's interesting. I've never heard that explained like that before. But then again, I don't think I've ever asked anyone questions before. So, yeah. Last year and recently, like when I've been moving in these spiritual circles, doing festivals, things like that, workshops and what have you, people keep talking about, if I can pronounce this, the mercury retrograde. What is that?
Yeah, so it happens about 3 times a year, and we call it the mercury retrograde as if it was moving backwards, when actually it just slows down its movement so much that it appears that it's moving backward. It's like being on the fast lane with your car, and it appears that the cars on the slower lane are moving backwards, but they're just moving slower. People often say that it's like, oh, like don't do this and don't do that on mercury retrograde, and it's it's not often so black and white, but I think it's more of a time to just go inward and reflect and just slow down. And they say that you should maybe review things that you're maybe going to make decisions on. Like, is there anything that hasn't been fully checked? Like, is there something I'm missing here? So that's a good time to do that. Like, just slow down, check your things. Is everything in order? They say don't make any big decisions. I don't think it's always that black and white, but that's basically what it is.
You see, I'm like so naive to this that I just thought it was like a one-time event or something. So it happens all the time.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
When's the next one?
Oh, so it was just, I think it ended in the end of April. Could be maybe July, August.
As far as I understood it, the ancient Babylonians invented astrology, right? As far as we know. And so do all ancient cultures have some form or version of astrology?
Yeah, so I gotta say I'm not an expert on this at all either. But what I've read is that it was actually possibly already discovered in Mesopotamia by the Sumerians. That was already like 4,000 years ago. And then the Babylonians made the system more sophisticated. And ever since that, it developed more and more in Egypt and in Greece. A lot. But for instance, the Aztecs and the Mayans had their own zodiac, like completely different, none of the same signs, but
Yeah.
similar qualities, of course, but just, yeah, not at all the same signs. And in the Aztec system, they didn't use planets, but they had gods and goddesses.
I don't know if we talked about it, but I went to Iraq to film a TV show. And we did talk about this. I was in this place called, it was like a citadel of Erbil, and it was supposed to be the place where the first spiritual writing was discovered, as far as we know. But I couldn't really find anyone to sort of give me anything on it, anything more on it. I was trying to do my own research, but nobody was really interested. And I sort of worked at this place, I was filming this TV show. And I kind of expected to sort of like touch a stone or something and be like, transported back into, I don't know. I didn't get anything from it, but who knows? Maybe I did. Maybe it'll sort of come out later or something. So how do astrologers predict the future with someone's birth chart?
So we would need the time and the birthplace. We would draw up the chart, and then we talk about transits and aspects. So each planet has its own cycle that takes a certain time to, like, let's say my son was in Cancer when I was born. So it has a certain time that it cycles back to that Cancer sign to that exact degree. And each planet has that own cycle length. So some planets are really slow, for instance, like Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, they're really slow. But then planets like Venus, the Moon, Mars, they're much faster. And so there's all these calculations that we already know, like, okay, well, the Moon is gonna be in this sign in September 2nd, or Mercury is gonna be in this sign on like 2027 in November. So we can already know in which sign they're going to be. And then in our chart, there's these things called houses, which there's 12 houses, 12 signs, and each house represents a life area or an area of our lives. So it could be relationships, or it could be work, or it could be health, it could be home. And so when we look at these planets, like, oh, okay, so we just had a Uranus-Jupiter conjunction, and let's say, okay, this is not going to happen, but let's say like next September, you will have a Uranus-Jupiter conjunction in your 7th house, for instance, and that's the house of relationship. So then we could say like, oh, something could be like something new, exciting, shocking, a big changes could happen in that area of your life. It could be personal relationship, work relationship, romantic. And so that's how it basically works. And then there's the thing of aspects, which is that these planets create aspects with each other. So for instance, they could be close to each other. They could be creating a thing called trine or a square. And some of these are more challenging. Some of these are very beneficial. Some just more emphasizing. And there's, hopefully I'm just not talking of like complete metaphysics, right? But I'm trying to be clear. So this is basically how it works. And I don't know if I really like to predict that much people's futures, because I think also with like timelines changing a lot, and it's pretty hard right now because there's infinite possibilities, but that's basically how it works.
That makes sense to me, and especially when you bring timelines into it, because that's kind of an area that I keep coming back to again and again. through something that I wrote about. And I talk about that a lot I've talked about that a lot on other people's podcasts. Like, we only really have this moment of now. And I feel like
Yeah.
there are all these possibilities out there in this kind of continuous, multi-dimensional thing that's just nuts when you start looking into it. So I always wonder about that, because
Yeah.
I've just tentatively stepped into the arena of giving people readings. There's an aspect of mediumship to it. And
Mm.
but it's more sort of like and I hate the word psychic, but it's more sort of just like an intuitive way of picking up on what's going on around people. And everybody wants to know, like, what's happening or when's it happening? Is it like next month? And I'm like, what? I don't know, because I feel
Exactly.
like on this point right now, that's a possibility. That's a strong possibility. The way that things are looking from where you are at right now. But
Yeah.
now we've talked about that, then that could potentially just take you in a completely different direction. So I feel like none of it's set, at least from that side of things. But actually talking about that, so I feel that astrology gets thrown in a lot with mediumship and tarot reading and all that kind of more sort of woo-woo stuff. When the way that you talk about it, it sounds like a very sort of mathematical kind of I don't know. There's a lot to unpick there. You know, you're really sort of like looking at the position of planets and all that kind of stuff. So, is there a sort of? Do you feel that there's like more of a grander design at play? Is there like a belief around astrology in some sort of higher power?
Um, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I do. Like, there was many questions there, but
Okay.
I'm gonna answer them one by one. So yes, I do absolutely believe that there is a grander design at play. And with astrology, if it's more mathematical or faith based, I think it can be very mathematical. And I think there's a lot of astrologers that make it very mathematical. And in the past, I'm sure in like ancient times too, it was partly very mathematical, and it's one of the oldest fields of study that they started to study with astronomy, and like a lot of, let's say, philosophers or mathematicians like also studied astrology. So it's very linked to that. And like I was talking about the planetary movements and aspects, with all those calculations, you could say that it is very mathematical. But one thing that I feel very strongly is that I think the best astrologers are intuitive and use it as a intuitive system,
Hmm.
because well, because what you also talked about, that of the timelines and predicting, you just like you kind of have to feel into it a lot and not just like, well, this calculation means that in absolute, and like, no, I don't believe that. And also, one good example that I heard someone say is that if you think about, for instance, two babies born at a hospital at the same exact day, same exact time, same exact city, is it gonna be the same? Like, it's gonna be the same chart, but is it gonna be the same person? No, it's two different souls. So you can't do a reading, the exact same reading to those two souls. Like, you need to use your intuition to feel, okay, well, what's the emphasis on this person? Like, what are they here to do? What are they here to um learn? So it you have to use your intuition, I believe, a lot, and it's it's one of the big things I think that makes a good astrologer.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me a lot, especially again as I'm sort of stepping into that arena through the mediumship sort of aspect of things. Yeah, fascinating. So you're in California. I would imagine that people are quite open to this, and there's quite a liberal sort of way of life there. Sorry, forgive me. I do personally sort of encounter skeptics here and there, but then there is like a very big movement of people that I sort of move in those circles now that buy into a lot of what we're talking about. And I feel that the attitudes are changing as well. I feel like people are more sort of open to talking about spirituality and things like that than they were maybe some years ago. Do you encounter any skeptics around this stuff? What do you just sort of like fluff them out, or how do you deal with them?
No, for sure. Of course. I think they're everywhere, even in California.
Right.
Yeah, so well, astrologically speaking, I would sometimes it feels like, well, they probably have a lot of earth in their chart. That's
Mhm.
that's often the case. Because earth is more like practicality and just like earthly things. And then, for instance, a lot of water could be more like into your emotions and intuition. And that's definitely not always the case. Of course, it's not that simple, but um, there could also be like a wound in their chart around spirituality or metaphysical things, and that's sometimes interesting to notice with, like, for instance, close people that you know their chart and they're like, no, I don't believe in astrology. And I'm like, yeah, I know why you don't. It's just that your chart proves it. But what else was I gonna say is that a lot of people don't really know what astrology is, and they believe that the sun sign astrology is astrology. So, in essence, they believe that for instance, the little snippets on magazines when they say like, okay, well, this is what's gonna happen for Libra this week, and they take it like, oh, well, that doesn't match, so I don't believe in astrology. But, like, of course, I wouldn't believe in that either because it's not real astrology. You're only taking into account the sun when there's so many other planets to actually look at and all the other things that's happening in the chart. So, to sum up, I know that astrology is not for everyone, and it doesn't have to be. I think, like, we all come here to focus on different things, and that's completely fine. Sometimes it makes me laugh, sometimes it makes me frustrated, and yeah, you encounter them everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. I'm encountering less of them, so I feel like it's just the path I'm going on is kind of leading me away from that. That being
Mm,
said, I don't necessarily just buy into everything just because it's kind of like, in my sort of field or the woo woo. So I kind of like, oh yeah, I love it.
yeah.
I do still have a sort of very skeptical way of looking at things as well. But then again, half the things I talk about probably sound completely nuts to like so many people. So, but, yeah, I think that's it. But like, is there any sort of area where is there any area where this like astrology kind of bleeds over into anything else in terms of spiritual practices that you do or any sort of rituals or are there any other kind of areas that you look into? Because you sound like you know a lot about.
Um, I mean, I do believe it's all linked. It is all linked in many ways. There's of course like the elemental energies that in astrology we talk a lot about, like the water, the fire, earth, air, and that can be linked to many spiritual practices and like also like Eastern practices. And then there's the signs, which is like archetypes, which are also talked about in different ways, not just astrology. So each sign is like an archetype that has a certain energy. And what else? There is numbers are also meaningful in astrology, so it's not just random numbers. The houses have the numbers, the signs technically have the numbers too. So um, it's, as you know, numbers are very important and each have a special meaning in spirituality. Um, there's the like geometry part, a little bit with the aspects too, and everything that it's in the chart is. So there's all these things that I would say that they are linked. They are very much linked. And then the planets, they represent gods, basically, which is found in mythologies and ancient cultures. So yeah, the list goes on and on and on. It's
Yeah, that really
drawn
is a lot.
out.
I don't even know, like even what you told me like today in the last 20 minutes or so that I barely knew any of that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was like guilty of just sort of looking at sun signs and thinking, oh, that's that. I think there's more to it, but yeah.
Yeah, there's a bit more to it.
In fact, you sound like you know a lot about it already. Are you looking into taking this more professional or?
Um, I think I mean, it's interesting, but it's been like only a year maybe that it's become a lot more prominent in my life for, I don't know how it didn't feel like a conscious choice. It's just, I suddenly felt like I was kind of thrown into it more, which is just really nice. And, yeah, I definitely believe that I will keep doing it also somehow professionally more and more in the future and maybe link to coaching or something like that. I can't really know exactly for sure, but I do think it has it has a place in my
Yeah.
feed.
So where can people find you? And also where can people find your music as well?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm building my website, so it'll hopefully be done in a few months. But until then, I think the best place to find me is on Instagram, and I have 2 accounts, but my spiritual stuff where I talk about all the stuff that not everyone wants to hear. The name is Mama Ethereal, so it has Mama and then lowercase Ethereal. And what was the other question?
Yeah, just in terms of where you're going with it and where can people find your music? Is
Oh,
that, are you
yes.
gonna throw it all together in terms of the website?
I am gonna throw the music in there too.
Yeah.
And for now, it's on YouTube or Spotify, which is my name, Mia Suszko.
Cool. Well, I'll add links to everything, and with your permission, might try to use a bit of your music to sort of play us out with. But really nice to catch up with you after a couple of years of not seeing you face to face.
Yeah, absolutely. This was fun.
All right. Thanks, Mia. Take care.
Thank you. You too.